Thank you, Mr. Deputy President, and I thank the members who have contributed to this bill. Like was mentioned when the bill was presented, this is a very bold and courageous piece of courageous step for the government to have come to this House to pass this piece of legislation, and it will need the support of all parties, particularly, like was just mentioned, the public servants who are the custodians of our public purse and who are accountable and responsible, really, not accountable, but responsible for implementing the policies and to make sure that the legislation works. Mr. Deputy President, it is very clear that a little something has been learnt by the leader of opposition business, to whom I mostly have to respond since he was the only member of the team to have spoken. The leader of opposition business has clearly understood that his time in this chamber is precious. So he takes every second of his time, which I think is commendable. And I must say that the time that the Independent did not give up or did not use was not only given up to the speaker here, it was given up, I think, to all speakers. But what is significant is not just the amount of time you use in this chamber, but what you use the time to do. And I still feel we have debated 3 different issues today, 2 motions and a bill, and the pattern has not changed. So this time around I intend to be very brief because the arguments presented did not warrant a lot for me to chew on, because they really, the question I was trying to figure out in my mind while the opposition was presenting was whether you support the bill or not. In fact, I very guardedly, because you had instructed us to avoid a lot of the crosstalk, I tried to whisper across to my colleague and say to him, do you, Mr. Deputy, I tried to ask him, do you or do you not support the bill? Because I was curious about what posture the opposition would take, particularly with this public finance management bill. Were they going to come to the Senate today? Because in the lower house, the leader of the opposition was absent as usual. The other member of parliament in the lower house was there but was absent when that bill was presented. So I did not get an impression as to what the position of the opposition was on that particular bill. And having presented the bill this morning, looking at the contents of the bill and the conduct of the opposition then in government, I could not see a relationship or a favoring or any similarity between their practice and what this bill was saying. So I was extremely curious as to what the leader of opposition business in the Senate would have said, or how he would have postured. But up to this minute, I am still I'm yet to hear the utterance from the opposition that they support this bill. So if you do not say that you support it, spent an entire presentation, went around the world, but to this minute, you have not said that you support the public finance management, debt management bill. So it leaves me to assume, therefore, Mr. Deputy President, that the opposition does not support the bill. And if a responsible opposition, and those of us who follow the parliamentary procedure, the chairperson of the Public Finance, the Public Accounts Committee, the PAC, is the leader of the opposition. I believe that the standing orders, the Constitution recognizes the importance of that particular role. It is not a government person, a government rep, who is the chair of the public.
Mr. President, I stand on the point of order.
Sorry, what's your point of order?
The leader of the opposition is misleading the House.
government.
Leader of government business, soon to be leader of opposition business. But, Mr. President, I wouldn't be long. By stating that the opposition does not support the bill, at no time any of us said that. We have stated all through the presentation it's a very important bill. It is my constitutional right to frame my discussion however I want. The leader of government business will not tell me what to say, and the leader of government business will not infringe upon my constitutional
Well,
rights.
except
the
that
opposition has said,
in fairness to the leader of government business,
Yeah.
you didn't state a position.
no, we stated
So-
it's a very
Yes, you said it's an
piece of
important bill,
legislation.
but you didn't state yes you support or no you don't support in any definitive way.
So it's a very important piece of legislation of which we are very familiar with, and we were very happy to be part of the construction of the policy thrust for the bill.
So so precisely. So then you can't rise on a point of order if you have chosen not to put your position forward. When he say he's left to assume, that's an assumption he's entitled to make. He didn't say you didn't support it. He said he has to assume that because you've not exactly.
May I proceed?
Please continue.
Mr. Deputy President, you see the semantics coming out. And I knew that I'm an old-fashioned teacher, you know. When you want to evoke certain responses from your students, you just have to make certain stimulating statements. And the things they don't want to say, they say it. So, Mr. Deputy President, it is very clear that the opposition refuses to say that they support the bill. They refuse. And until now, this opposition has not stated that they support the bill. And let it be stated in these records, in the records of this parliament, that the St. Lucia Labour Party government on the 5th of October 2023 came to this house, came to this chamber, presented a public debt management bill that is supposed to safeguard the way in which the finances of this country is used. This bill did not originate from the St. Lucia Labour Party. This is something that is a requirement that is set outside of our jurisdiction, that we as responsible governments need to engage or embrace. And this opposition today has refused to state emphatically that they support this bill. And therefore, Mr. Deputy President, just as I respect the opposition member's right to his constitutional right to state his position as he wishes, my constitutional right to state my position as I wish is that I am left to assume that since you do not state that you support and you are silent, I am left to assume that your silence means that you don't support. That is my assumption. Now, Mr. Deputy, I don't know why they're making a case about support or not, because you could have said so. So let's move forward. And therefore, Mr. Deputy President, it appears that this bill is not in sync with the DNA of the opposition.
That's right.
It's foreign to them. And so when it comes, they don't want to touch this. This is not aligned to what we are made of. The fabric of our philosophy is not in line with this bill. So this government of the St. Lucia Labour Party on this side, we emphatically state that we support the bill.
Yeah.
We support it. Let it be known in the records that we support it. And so, Mr. Deputy President, I want to touch on a couple of things that the leader of opposition business mentioned. He pointed out that we have had about a 20-year period of consistent deficit. But you see, again, he has a way of being very selective in stating his facts. And like I said earlier, keeping certain figures away. And so since he has mentioned deficit, I want to remind and state here that finally, under this government, in a year, we have realized a surplus. and not just a surplus,
Mr. President,
but a primary
point
surplus.
of order. I raise
What is your point of order, Senator Fede?
The member is misleading the House. The substantive balance is the overall balance. And the overall balance for the last 20 years have been negative. I'm sorry. Don't mislead the people.
No, but again, Senator Fede, I think perhaps he preempted you and corrected, well, not corrected, clarified that what he was saying, it's a primary surplus, which I believe is correct. So continue, Senator Fede.
Well, you see, again, Mr. Deputy, it has happened again. You see, he doesn't allow me to complete the statement. And I know he's going to come, and it happens over and over. I don't know, in the very same way the opposition has not learned that there are certain things they should never do again, because the people of St. Lucia has voted. They keep doing the same thing. He's not learning, Mr. Deputy. I'm disappointed. He's not learning. Mr. Deputy President, I don't know what is misleading about the fact that I just stated. So, Mr. Deputy President, the primary surplus, yes. He was on his feet before I even said the word. But I'll say it so that the records have it. Yes, the primary surplus. And so, this government, because of that, we have been able now to say to our public servants, our retirees, our pensioners, our teachers, that we can put in a little something extra at the end of certain months, that we can give you your TMA, teacher materials allowance. That is why the government is comfortable that when we manage the economy well and we cut down on the deficit and there is any surplus, we're not going to take it and send it anywhere. We're going to spend it on the people of this country. So, Mr. Deputy President, there was a point made about borrowing, and it is true that every government will borrow, and every government is responsible for paying the debts of its predecessors. But there is a very essential, fundamental difference between what you're paying the debt for. It's just not paying debt. Mr. Deputy President, down the road, whatever government it is, 20 years from now, 18 years from now, I would much rather know that I am paying a debt of $200 million because $200 million was borrowed to make sure that my country had a hospital that had not been completed in 14 years. That I can say that I took $200 million to give my people a hospital, than for me to have to be paying for, now I don't want to mention names, but to be paying for DFCs, for roads or road that had to be built to facilitate a horse-race track that has not brought 1 cent to my country. 13 million? And the list goes on and on. So while I agree in principle that governments will have to inherit the debts of governments previous to them, it is what you have to pay that is the issue. So when the member attempts to talk about debt and who borrowed and who has borrowed and not borrowed, I think it is imperative that we clearly state the difference. And every time there is an attempt by the opposition to mislead and they are caught, they are quick to say that's politics. So when they are doing the mischief and you catch them, oh, that's politics. But when the opposition catches them, then they say that we're being political. Well, I'll say something here, Mr. Deputy President. This chamber, you know, aside from two of you, 2 persons here who are independent, this chamber is occupied by politicians. All of us here are politicians. So when you come into this chamber, you expect the discussion to have political flavor. Now, it doesn't have to be low class and bantering and mepui, because that's not my style. But we are politicians. We contest elections. So do not categorize a criticism as political while you call yours, it's just politics. I don't know the difference. So, Mr. Deputy President, there was an assertion that $465 million was borrowed by this government, and an attempt to give us a long a long history on economics, a long lecture on economics, and quoting China and all kinds of strange examples. I wish to make it very clear, Mr. Deputy President, that this government, in its 2 years, the majority of the funds that we have had to borrow is being used or has to be used to pay for the debt incurred on this country, on our citizens, by the government that was led by the United Workers' Party. The $465 million that he jumped on, I can tell you that most of that money is being used to pay to finance previous
Mr. President,
government debts.
I have to, previous governments or the government of the United Workers' Party? Because I rise on a point of order. He's misleading the House by saying that most of the money is borrowed is to finance the debts of the previous United Workers' Party. That's wrong. If we look carefully at the debt servicing, you will see that a lot of the debt taken by the UWP are debt with moratorium.
Mr. Vice President,
yes.
and so the member has not indicated what he's standing on. Why he's interrupting.
He's misleading the House. Just sit down.
No.
Hello.
Members, let me caution you again. I think we've had a very long day, and spirits are getting a little higher than they need to be. Please conduct yourself appropriately. Address the chair. You rose on a point of order, and we're asking what the point of order is. So if you can just state that clearly.
So thank you, Mr. President. The point of order is that the member is misleading the House by saying that the majority of the monies that they have borrowed is to finance debt by the United Workers' Party administration in the previous years. I put it to him that the facts don't show that, because when you look at the simple fact that you've borrowed almost $700 million. Now, when you came on the day, and I think I had the date down.
Senator Peredo, it's not an attempt for you to make a new presentation.
No, but he cannot back it up.
Right, so you've made that point.
He has no figures. It's going way back.
Right,
the back is going way back.
So you've made that point. So
he needs to correct that.
So Senator Ferdinand, unless you can substantiate what you said with the breakdown, I would ask you to move on.
Mr. Deputy President, it's a very interesting evening. And I just saw the lead-up opposition business. It looks like it's in the DNA now. They call the term way back. I think somebody was saying that a certain prime minister was way better than Sir John Compton. And you know, this is kind of beginning, it's getting a little bit comical now. So I will move on, Mr. Deputy. I'll move on. I'll tell you what is a fact. The monies that we've borrowed thus far, almost all of the loans have a moratorium. It means that we have not started paying for them. That's a fact. Whether it's a moratorium of 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. So it means that this government has not started to pay a single cent to finance debts that we would have taken. Okay? We were not in government between 2016 and 2021. So we would not have borrowed money then. And it is very clear, Mr. Deputy President, that within those years, if you have to look at a summary of just some of the periods, say ahead of the COVID period, between 2016 and 2019, when there was no COVID, over $300 million were borrowed. By whom? Could not have been by the St. Lucia Labour Party. And that debt is being financed on service right now. Now, while I don't want to get, you see, the leader of opposition business is not, he knows what he's doing. He's trying to get into a whole argument on figures and to try to tie up this is my rebuttal. He's not going to dictate how I do it. So what I will do instead is to establish certain basic facts that are not disputable. For example, the government of the St. Lucia Labour Party today, every month we have to pay debts. We are not paying for any of the monies that we borrowed thus far. The government then, that he was part of, it's a fact that prior, and everything is COVID. COVID made us do everything. COVID made us call people names. COVID made us do all of that. Before 2020, this government had borrowed in excess of $300 billion. And then, after or during the COVID period, when the IMF made the facility available, we know what happened. They just went crazy. And I remember the then Prime Minister saying, I'm proud to be able to borrow. I didn't know how being able to borrow makes you proud. Nobody wants to borrow. You would prefer if you didn't have to borrow. It was such a it was like a spree. And today I am referring to the government of the day having to service debt incurred by the previous government, and that becomes an issue of contention. Mr. Deputy President, I believe also that the present opposition has tried to evade the issue of mismanagement, the issue of recklessness, and the issue of being irresponsible. I mean, we have to face it. And I think it is time for them to reconcile, level with the people of this country. They have made the decision and they have elected another government. You have an opportunity, level with them. Just level with the people. They have elected you before, they have changed governments before. Just level with them. This whole masking of what is reality is not going to work. And we have at times had to say to the people, we did it that way, we don't think it was correct, we have come back to you. Look at how many times we've come here to amend legislation. You know why, Mr. Deputy? Because certain sectors speak to us, certain groups raise concerns, and we have to come back, as the Prime Minister sometimes says, swallow your spit, come back and say, you know what, we didn't get it right, and so we are coming back to fix it. That's okay. But you see the arrogance, the pompous attitude that we can do no wrong and we're always on the right side. And when we've done wrong, it's not our fault, it's somebody else's fault. We need to change that. None of us is absolute and perfect. We need to change that. There is nothing wrong in saying that we are responsible for what is this government inherited. That's a fact. That is a fact. You can't dispute that. Mr. Deputy President, there was a very significant point raised by one of my colleagues here when, in the discussion, she made reference to how what we're doing in terms of following the precepts and the principles of this piece of legislation is in line with what our government wants to achieve for our people. And I think I want to identify myself. I want to identify with that statement. Because it really is, like I said, it's not in the DNA of the opposition, but it is in the DNA of the St. Lucia Labour Party to have these principles. And it is consistent with some of what we've done. As a people, we want to rebuild this country. There has been a lot of division, a lot of anger, a lot of political tribalism, a lot of these things that have come into the fray. And I think at this time we need to move away from that. And when the reference was made to the issue of consciousness and the identity of our people, I want to identify with that. That the conversation today is different. The conversation today is about making this society one that is more united, one that seeks to observe principles like what this particular piece of legislation is seeking to do. Doing things right, being honest, speaking the truth, emancipation, as you were saying, is a symbol of our identity, what we represent, who we are as a people. Our Creole festivals, this morning we acknowledge Moi Heritage Creole. It reflects who we are. And I think it is much better. The people of this country can relate to what we're doing, because they don't have to put up with any ideology that is foreign, Canadian with an accent, and making reference to all kinds of things that people do not relate to, and quote unquote dissing some of the institutions in this country that represent what we stand for. So this bill, Mr. Deputy President, what this bill is asking you to do as a government and as a people is to apply the principles of good governance, to apply the principles of accountability when it comes to the use of public funds. It has made recommendations, or it has enshrined in it certain practices and procedures that will ensure that corrupt government cannot survive.
That's true.
That is what it's doing. No corrupt government will be able to survive based on the principles of this act. And our government is very comfortable with that, because we have our operations and our thinking is in line with those kinds of practices. So even without this piece of legislation, we were already aligning ourselves with that kind of practice. So it's almost natural that you can embrace it. You know, it's like a child who comes from a home where people greet people, they respect the rules or the laws of the household, they know they have to clean their room, they understand order. When they go to school, it's easy. They greet their teacher. They know when they sharpen their pencil, they must throw it in the bin. They know when it's time for it's recess, they go to the washroom. You know, they put their hand up to ask a question. When they are corrected, they accept it. It's natural. That child is going to adjust, because that is part of their own upbringing. The Labour Party philosophy can relate to that, because that's part of our DNA, to be accountable, to explain things to people, and to give an account of what we do with the people's money. So this bill, we can come here and say openly that we support it. But now I know, Mr. Deputy President, now we know why this opposition cannot stand in this house and open their mouth and say they support the bill. Now I know. I waited and I waited, and I challenged the leader of opposition business early in my rebuttal to stand up and say he supported the bill. But he cannot do it. It is not in his DNA. It is not in the DNA of his party. It is not in their philosophy to support something that demands that kind of accountability. And so he has failed. The opposition and the United Workers' Party have failed. Yes. With an opportunity today to stand up and make a declaration in public to the people of St. Lucia that we support a public debt management bill. And even when he stood up and did all of his theatrics, he refuses to say it. And that, to me, represents the essence of what the opposition over there represents. And so, Mr. Deputy President, I want to differentiate between those of us on this side and those of us on that side. I want to differentiate. I completely differentiate. We on this side are in sync with the philosophy of good governance and public accountability. And we can once again identify with this piece of legislation. And I want to categorically state that on the records of today's sitting, the opposition United Workers' Party did not, refuse to, and could not see that they support a public debt finance bill and good governance that represents good governance. And so, whether they want to accuse me of saying that they don't, whether they can posture and gesture, it is clearly stated now that there is a vast difference between the two groups. And I would prefer to be on this side and support this particular. And I urge the people of St. Lucia and around the world who are listening and following this debate to understand that we are dealing with a difference of principle. We are dealing with something that is essential. Our financiers, those we are going to approach to borrow, those who have ensured that this legislation is available, they are listening. And so they understand that this government respects and appreciates this. And that there is another group that seems to have very little to do with that philosophy. I leave that to the people of St. Lucia to deal with one day down the road. So, Mr. Deputy President, I once again reaffirm this government's position on this bill, and I look forward to its passing and for the benefits that it will bring to our public servants, to our St. Lucian folk, and to ensure that our public debt management and our level of accountability and transparency is always on par with the expectations of the international community and with the expectations of the people of our country. I thank you.